As House Republicans continue to investigate the Biden family's influence peddling schemes, new reports indicate the House Oversight Committee has issued a subpoena for Devon Archer, a former close friend and business associate of Hunter Biden, in testimony that could take place as early as this coming Thursday. Archer is expected to tell Congress that President Biden met with dozens of Hunter's business associates during his time as vice president. Throughout his 2020 campaign, as well as in interviews since taking office, President Biden has repeatedly claimed he had no knowledge of his son's foreign business dealings. Joining me now to discuss this and much more is Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin. He serves on the Senate Homeland Security Committee, the Senate Budget Committee, and the Senate Finance Committee. Senator Johnson, welcome back to Washington Watch. Always great to see you.
Well, Tony, great to see you.
So your reaction to this latest report on the Biden family investigation?
Well, as you pointed out, Joe Biden has been lying through his teeth for years that he didn't have any knowledge of Hunter Biden's overseas business dealings. We proved that was a lie. The mainstream media hasn't noticed it's a lie. So it wouldn't surprise me at all that Joe Biden was, far more involved in Hunter Biden's schemes, in his grifts, in his corruption.
I want to go to what was on Capitol Hill last week, the testimony of two IRS whistleblowers. Before I get into that, I just want to, if you would give a quick legal definition or the reason we have what we call whistleblowers. Why are they there? What role do they perform for good government, and what protections are they to be afforded?
Well, the foundational premise of this nation is that the people have the power. And we grant government the ability to collect taxes, to do certain things, but we're the ultimate authority. They are accountable to us, government is, and government should be transparent. And so when you have agencies that are running amok, Congress, for I think more than a century, has passed laws to protect those individuals, those agencies, when they come forward and tell us about problems in their agencies. We want transparency. We want to be able to hold these agencies accountable. And so we have multiple laws that have been passed, very strong laws on the books. But Tony, I come from the private sector. I am shocked coming to Washington, D.C. and seeing how pervasive and quite honestly effective retaliation is against whistleblowers. These agencies know what they're doing. They realize Congress has very little enforcement power, and so they continue to retaliate against whistleblowers with impunity.
I mean, in fact, these whistleblowers from the IRS have testified that they have been retaliated against, and there seems to be no fear from those doing the retaliation in the Biden administration for this being laid out there for the public to see.
Again, it's because Congress has very weak enforcement powers. Again, there's egregious acts of individual retaliation, but from an institutional standpoint, the fact that the entire investigatory team, the IRS investigatory team, was taken off the Hunter Biden investigation just shows you the corruption of that investigation, the corruption within if the IRS pulled them off, corruption within the IRS. If DOJ pulled them off, the corruption within the DOJ. We had the head of the criminal division of the IRS in front of the Senate Finance Committee a few months ago. Been there for 30 years. I asked him point blank, have you ever seen a case when an entire investigatory team has been pulled off a case? In his years of service, he'd never seen that. So I would say this is quite unprecedented. And the level of corruption that we are witnessing right now in these federal agencies, I think, may also be unprecedented.
So as these whistleblowers are pulling back the curtain of corruption on the Biden family, it's also revealing, as we're seeing this retaliation, and we're seeing just in their testimony what the IRS, what the DOJ has done, this truly is what we've heard about the deep state. That is, it will do whatever it takes and run over whoever they have to protect their territory.
And a really good sign of that is a lot of this obstruction, a lot of this interference in the investigation of Hunter Biden occurred during the Trump administration. Trust me, President Trump would have wanted to see this information come out. He would have wanted to see a thorough and honest investigation and prosecution of Hunter Biden, but that didn't happen. So unfortunately, you have the radical left infiltrating virtually every institution of this country. Government agencies are part of those institutions, and so those institutions have been infiltrated with leftists. In many cases, radical leftists. It's not a fair fight. A Republican president like President Trump, didn't even have a chance. I mean, let's face it. Within 2 weeks of his presidency, phone conversations between two world leaders were leaked to the media. I mean, who could President Trump trust? Right. It's a very awful state of affairs.
Let's talk about some of the members of Congress that are fighting to make sure this information comes to the forefront and the American people see what is happening so that we can make the changes that need to be made. Part of this is going to be elections, but it is also making sure that we have men and women like you that are continuing to stand up and ask these questions. What type of retaliatory actions or attacks have been made toward the members of Congress that are trying to expose this?
Well, we get vilified in the media. For my part, I've been accused of soliciting, disseminating Russian disinformation. They've used that same Russian canard against myself and Senator Grassley. Again, we get ridiculed, we get vilified. It hasn't stopped us because we know we're just trying to uncover and expose the truth. And unfortunately, our Democrat colleagues have no interest whatsoever in exposing the truth of the deep state, because it's partisan in their favor. It's working in their favor. So the only way we can really, for example, have subpoena powers when we get the majority, and we have people like Comer and Jordan and others, Representative Smith, that are using their committees to subpoena these records and making this stuff public.
So, Senator Johnson, what can our listeners, our viewers do to aid in this effort to not just expose? I mean, that's the first step, but it requires more than that. We have to change it.
Well, if you have a Democrat House member, if you have a Democrat senator, come to Washington, D.C. and show up at their offices and ask to meet with your Democrat senator, Democrat House members. You can call, you can write. If they're personalized letters, that's a better idea than some kind of block or form letter. But showing up in Washington, D.C. or showing up in district offices is probably the most powerful. It'll be very respectful, but just talk about what's happening in this country and how we need, for example, a single set of laws applied equally. We can't have a dual dual standard of justice, and that's what we have right now. It's very dangerous for our democracy.
Yeah, and what I want to make sure that folks realize that it is bad. I mean, it's real. What we're talking about here is real, but I don't want people throwing in the towel. I mean, we've got men and women like you that are fighting this fight. You just went through a tough re-election, so you could come back and continue this fight, and there are many others. And I think we're at a tipping point. So now is not the time to back off, to shrink back. Now is the time to push forward with everything we have, because I really think the future of our republic hinges on whether or not we expose, change, and push out those in the deep state that are taking this nation down this path.
Tony, what is so unique about America is it was really the first nation that recognized that our freedom, our rights, weren't granted to us by a king or by government, but they were granted to us by our Creator. These are our rights, and we have to fight for them. We can't give up. We know what made this country great. It's those God-given rights. And the essential ingredient, I would say, is freedom, which has allowed us to dream and aspire and build and create this marvel we call America. But an even higher value is truth. And that is what right now is so at risk with the media, with the leftists in these institutions, is we are losing the ability to discern truth. Without truth, what do we have?
You're right, and we've got to use our freedoms while we have them to defend that truth and make sure that truth is known. Very quickly, Senator Johnson, I want to switch topics. Of course, the Biden investigations dominating the headlines, but we have the National Defense Authorization Act moving its way through the Senate. It's already passed the House. And Senator Schumer, the Democratic leader, has called the House amendments toxic. You've got Senator Tuberville, who's standing up, again, for the law, keeping taxpayers from being forced to facilitate abortions in the military. How do you see this playing out in the Senate this week?
I hope we support Senator Tuberville. I hope we support the House amendments. We need a military that is ready, and I hate to say it, but lethal. I mean, that's the whole job of the military. We don't need a woke military. And unfortunately, we have far too many generals. We have a commander-in-chief that is far more concerned about wokeness than they are about readiness. And that's one of the reasons that we're missing our recruitment goals. It's a very troubling time in this country where you have political leadership taking the finest among us and forcing them to do things that they just simply don't want to do. And so people aren't signing up. It's not the way to defend freedom.
That's right. And I think what the House amendments did on the NDAA is move us from this woke weakness back to strategic strength. We don't want to use it, but we want to have it, because if you have it, you usually don't have to use it. Senator Johnson, I want to thank you for joining us, and again, want to thank you for your leadership on Capitol Hill.
Have a great night.